I like to get to the point in my videos if I can, but I can see the comments getting out of hand on this one, so I'm gonna make a short statement up front to set expectations. Shedeur Sanders is likely the most polarizing prospect in this year's draft, evidenced by the constant barrage of hot takes about his play on the field, over-analysis of every word that he utters, and all these stories about his relationship with his father, teammates, and NFL teams. Not a day goes by where I don't see an opinion about his character from someone who doesn't even know him, or an opinion about his play on the field from someone who clearly hasn't watched him take a single snap. That's the world of mass sports media, and it doesn't really bother me, honestly. Teach their own. But it's not really my thing. This is not going to be a hot take filled video with absolutes that empower one group of people and piss off another. This is going to be a nuanced analysis of Shedeur's games, his strengths and weaknesses that I've seen from the perspective of someone who doesn't root for any college football team and had no opinion about him going in. When I make criticisms, I'm not rooting against him, just pointing out what I see. And the same goes for strengths. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm right about everything or have all of the information, but what I am guaranteeing is that I've watched the film, and based on my subjective viewing of the film, I'm going to present you with what I believe to be an objective scouting report of Shedeur Sanders. If you don't want a nuanced analysis, this video's probably not for you. Now that I've killed the retention rate with this long-ass intro and made you question your sexuality by talking to you in a stern, authoritative voice, we can do the fun part. Let's talk ball. Shedeur is a very different prospect than I thought he would be going into his film. Based on descriptions of him that I've heard from other people, I expected him to be this Caleb Williams type player who was holding onto the ball forever and scrambling around, but counterbalancing those negatives with incredible tools, playmaking ability, and ability to hit tight window throws. But watching the film, I've learned that this is not at all the truth. Shedeur is a player with a pretty defined skill set that comes with particular strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about his strengths first, then we'll talk weaknesses. Shedeur is at his best as a field general or pocket passer type, operating short, quick concepts and schemed up plays where he'll consistently deliver accurate passes under 10 yards. On these short, schemed up throws, he's very accurate and throws with good touch and ball placement. On the point about ball placement, he's generally really good at adjusting the placement of these throws depending on the leverage of the defenders, sometimes throwing low and away, others slightly behind and inside, and others high and outside, preventing DBs from getting into the catch point to break up passes, which allows him to continue carving up defenses with rhythm on these throws over and over with constant completions. At times, you might describe his accuracy as being pinpoint, and he really does fit the definition of a surgical pocket passer when you watch him consistently deliver accurate passes to wide receivers on slants, hitches, short ins, short outs, screens, and throws to the flat. On many of these types of throws, he has shown the ability to hit wide receivers in stride, passing through holes in the zone, and has shown what I would call good anticipation. I wouldn't say he made any throws where I was wowed by his anticipation, but he has thrown with what I would say is solid or good anticipation at times, and he can play with good timing when he's working in rhythm. On these short types of throws, his upper body mechanics are excellent, and his release is quick and concise, which allows him to get the ball out quickly to his wide receiver once he sees it open. Additionally, because a lot of his game is premised on operating short, quick passing concepts in the tight underneath sections of the field, he's an excellent red zone passer. But working outside of the red zone, the ideal offensive game plan for him is death by 1,000 paper cuts. Now, I'm not totally sure that's how he wants to play, but we'll get to that. I'm just saying it seems like the best style of play for him based on his skill set. But obviously, defenses won't let you just continue to carve them up on short throws all game, so let's talk about throws of 10 plus yards. Now, all throws aren't made alike. There's a huge difference between throwing a comeback versus throwing a seam versus throwing a dig, but to overgeneralize and put them all in one big bucket, Shedeur is good enough at throws over 10 plus yards, with some being better than others, but he's pretty much capable of hitting all of them. The consistency at which he does so is a different story, but let's stick on what he does well on these types of throws for now. Shedeur isn't an elevator by any means on these types of throws, but he's good enough at them to keep the defense honest so they can't start overplaying the short game. Now, this is where I'll say that we have to have some nuance, because although what I'm going to say will sound like a weakness, there actually is a really great quality in here that's a strength. Ready? On throws beyond 10 yards, Shedeur is hardly a quarterback who makes the lives of his wide receiver easy, but the one thing that you can absolutely say about him is he always gives his wide receiver a chance, both from a decision-making stance and an accuracy stance. Starting with decision-making, he's not shy about throwing up the ball in 50-50 situations and trusting his wide receiver to make a play on the ball, which is great because having a quarterback like this helps maximize the talent of teams who have elite wide receivers who just need to get the ball in their hands. He'll continually feed them without issue. Moving to accuracy, on throws beyond 10 yards, I would say that he rarely throws a perfect ball. Many of his passes are very underthrown or off the mark slightly, but he rarely completely misses. He might underthrow what should be a deep touchdown, causing an incompletion, but remember, he almost always gives his receiver a chance. Despite the inaccuracies on these passes, they will almost always be in the ballpark enough that his wide receiver will have an opportunity to come up with a big play, even if it's not the maximum amount of yards they could have gotten. This poses a problem for teams with less wide receiver talent, but again, will excite teams with an elite wide receiver or a number of weapons to utilize who can win jump ball and contested catch situations or make difficult catches in general. As a passer, his precision in the quick passing game and willingness and ability to make throws down the field give him a fairly good floor as a player. Because of this floor, he could come in and start immediately at a good enough level. He could even put up good numbers depending on whether he has weapons around him. For example, think along the lines of Brock Purdy, Jimmy G, or a Tua type role, where his skill set is maximized by the wide receivers and the wide receiver's talent is maximized by the quarterback, because they'll be put in a position to make plays underneath and rack up yards after the catch, and they'll also have opportunities to make plays downfield, even if they're not the easiest of opportunities. His floor is further heightened by his experience. Playing in college for 4 years, he's shown consistent growth over that time period and has been tasked with making many types of throws: fades, comebacks, posts, corners, ins, outs, slants, digs, and to all areas of the field. His experience also shows up in his mental toughness to bounce back from turnovers, sacks, and to come up big in clutch situations. His NFL bloodlines also certainly help, as he's likely been trained for this moment since he was young, and he also likely has had many resources to turn to for training and advice for help in difficult situations, especially ones that are particular to being an NFL quarterback. He's also more prepared for the NFL in the sense that he's very used to playing under pressure and throwing from crowded pockets. According to PFF, he was pressured 203 times in 2024, which was the highest by 21 pressures. Breaking that down to a rate-based stat, he was pressured on 36.1% of his dropbacks, which was 21st in the nation. When under pressure, PFF gave him a 64.4 passing grade, which was 9th in the nation, a 68.4 adjusting completion percentage, which was 11th in the nation, and a 95.2 passer rating, which was 3rd in the nation. But if we turn to his traditional stats in all situations, not just under pressure, they're no doubt impressive. His 74% completion percentage in 2024 was 1st in the FBS, which is especially impressive in light of the number of throws he made, which was 477. On his 353 completions, he racked up 4,134 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Turning to more context-based stats that take into account drops and interceptions that are not the quarterback's fault, Shedeur's turnover-worthy play percentage of 1.3% was the 3rd lowest in the nation, and his 81.6 adjusted completion percentage was 2nd. But let's now turn to weaknesses. And again, let's approach this with some nuance. There are weaknesses that are specific to Shedeur Sanders simply because he's being talked about as a potential number 1 overall pick, and if not, a top 5 pick. With a different expectation comes different standards. It's the facts of life, and it's the same in every career. So we're going to have to judge Shedeur by the standards of what we expect for a top 5 quarterback in a standard draft class. By that I mean a top 5 pick, not just a top 5 ranked quarterback in the position. So that's a good segue into our first weakness, which is his lack of tools, which is a weakness on 2 fronts. A, he doesn't really have that high ceiling or ability to elevate a team that you expect with a top 5 pick. And B, his play style accents his lack of tools. Let's talk about these one by one. On the first point, his lack of tools just simply prevents him from making the types of plays that you expect from a first round pick, and especially a top 5 pick. When I say lack of tools, I'm referring to size, arm strength, and athleticism. Size is not really as important of a point, but it's notable that Shedeur is listed at 6'2", which is 33rd percentile, and 215 pounds. On athleticism, it's not necessarily a prerequisite for a quarterback, but he's also way slower than you'd expect for a player with his playing style. For the amount of times that he spins away from defenders and runs out of the pocket, holding onto the ball for inordinate periods of time to hunt for the big play, he simply just doesn't have the speed to run away from NFL-level defenders. He can't even outrun Kansas defensive linemen. Think about Caleb Williams on the college level. He was much more elusive against better competition, and we've seen in the NFL this year, he's struggled to evade sacks. But again, size and athletic ability are not really the big issue here, it's the arm strength and the ability to drive the football off platform that really concerns me, especially when we're talking about taking him with a top 5 pick. Even with a good base, he doesn't have the arm strength to consistently hit out routes to the outside shoulder, to zip passes into tight windows, or to lead a wide receiver vertically on passes down the field. This problem is made worse by the fact that he's often throwing unnecessarily off his back foot, making it harder for him to get air under the ball. But again, even with a clean base, the day he's drafted, he'll be in the bottom of the league in arm strength. Even on some of his highlight plays, you see so many times where would-be touchdowns turn into 50-50 jump balls because he underthrows the ball, or he's late on a pass because he needs to wind up his whole body to get a ball to a spot. Even when wide receivers are so wide open that the catch doesn't become contested from being underthrown, you'll see wide receivers stopping or slowing up their routes to catch the ball. This is not only bad in the sense that it makes harder catches, but now the wide receivers are getting their shit rocked by DBs waiting for the football. In the NFL, many of these underthrows that his wide receivers came down with would be PBUs or interceptions because the DBs get their head around quicker, are better athletes, and they're more experienced. For example, on this play, his wide receiver has a step of separation on the DB, but he has to slow down to catch the ball in stride, allowing the DB to get back into the play and cause an incompletion. +1 to Shedeur though for faking out the cameraman, which means we don't have the end zone angle. On this next play, from a clean pocket, he actually does complete this ball, but watch how Hunter has to come to a stop and just hover around the area and then make a contested catch instead of catching a ball out in front of him on the sideline and potentially being able to run for more yards. And here on the corner route, he slightly underthrows it, making it a contested catch, which causes an incompletion instead of a throw in between the defenders. That's by no means an easy throw, and I actually did give him a point for attempting it and seeing the opportunity, but the underthrow causes the incompletion. And on this play, this is a touchdown if he leads the receiver straight, but the receiver has to instead run laterally and slow down to make this catch. And on the screen now, I'll put 2 more examples of missed touchdowns where he just straight up underthrew the ball. Credit where it's due for him putting the ball in a position to be caught, because you're still getting a big play out of this, but when you're vying to be a top 5 pick, you just simply have to have enough arm strength to lead your wide receivers vertically enough to convert these touchdown opportunities, because every yard and every point matters in the NFL, especially if you're going to a bad situation in the top few picks. You can't be turning down free touchdowns. But let's also talk about the throws that never were, because the lack of arm strength limits the amount of throws available to him in the first place. There are a ton of times on film where he's on the run and has the opportunity to make a play off platform, and he either takes it and doesn't have the arm strength to make the throw, or he turns it down because he doesn't trust that he has the arm strength to make the throw. Again, this is fine for a second round pick, but for a top 5 pick, or a first rounder even, you expect them to be able to maximize most of your play calls or to create if the play doesn't work. If he's breaking out of the pocket and there's a wide open guy, you want him to be able to sling the ball and hit the defense over the top, not run for 3 yards, throw the ball away, or underthrow the ball at the wide receiver's feet. For example, on this play, he's got the wide receiver on a straight line to the sideline, so you want to see him unload it here and hit him for a first down. Instead, he hesitates and he throws it away. But on this play, he does attempt the throw. You can see he's got the wide receiver streaking downfield and he puts in a solid effort. This is a better throw than a lot of people could make, but a top 5 draft pick should be expected to make one of these throws, and instead, he throws a pass which has a good chance of being intercepted in the NFL if the DB gets his head around and locates the ball quicker. Here, he steps up and he's able to evade defenders, maybe holding the ball a little bit long, but he's making it work, so I'm not complaining. And he's rewarded by a wide open receiver, and then when he goes to throw, he's short, resulting in an incompletion. And on this play, he has Hunter screaming up the seam, but he's not ready to throw, and then he resets himself, and he just doesn't throw this ball. Unlike a quarterback with a better arm, he just doesn't have the pure arm strength to just rip this downfield with his feet not set underneath him. He has to take the time to get set to just throw this ball. So to summarize this point, he simply doesn't have the prototypical size that you want to see. He doesn't have the speed or athletic ability of a player who opens up the offense or can consistently extend plays by evading sacks. And he doesn't have the arm talent to make throws to many areas of the field late in the down when in the pocket, or to make plays from outside of the pocket when the scripted play breaks down. He can absolutely go out there and utilize the talent on the roster, but he isn't going to be someone who elevates the other players on the field or creates when the structured play falls apart. He's not really a player who opens up the playbook in the offense by being such a rushing threat that defenses have to play differently, like Lamar Jackson, or by having such a rocket arm that defenses can't cheat up for fear that he'll throw a laser into a tight window 50 yards down the field like Josh Allen, or by being able to evade defenders and make throws off platform outside of the pocket such that defenders are forced to attempt to cover receivers downfield for way longer than they have the ability to do, like a Patrick Mahomes. But on the flip side, he's also not currently one of those players who can elevate in different ways without the tools, like a Tom Brady, whose intellect and ability to read defenses allowed him to exploit the smallest weaknesses in a defense, or Joe Burrow, who pairs elite pocket presence with consistently elite ball placement and anticipation throwing into tight windows. Could he maybe be one of those 2 latter guys? It's certainly possible, but the lack of tools limits his ceiling to having to win with elite ball placement, anticipation, and processing, which he just doesn't possess right now. That's not to say that he can't get there, but you can very literally say the same thing about every quarterback picked in the late rounds who is considered a high IQ player with poor physical tools. You could always tell yourself, if they become a better processor, they'll be a great player. Also, I know you don't expect a rookie to be Tom Brady right off the bat, and it's very unfair to compare him to Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and Mahomes, but the point I'm making is that, with a top 5 pick, you want an elite player, or to see a likely path to becoming an elite player, because there are certainly non-quarterbacks that can be taken with these picks that have a higher likelihood of becoming an elite player at their position. But when we talk about whether there's a clear path to becoming that player, the path is obscured when you look at his playing style, which almost highlights his lack of tools rather than minimizing the impact. For him to elevate to this cerebral type player that wins with IQ and anticipation, he'll need to improve on a number of things. First, he needs to find a better balance of extending plays and getting rid of the ball. He simply just takes way too many sacks. Many will blame his offensive line, and I would agree, they weren't the greatest and likely hurt his evaluation in many senses, but he also had the 13th highest time to throw in the nation and was charted as being responsible for 33.7% of his own pressure, which is 4th highest in the nation, and he was responsible for 17 of his own sacks, the highest in the nation. The first reason for many of his sacks was his overconfidence in his own athletic ability. There were so many times on tape that he'd attempt to evade a defender in the backfield instead of throwing it away or stepping up, and he would immediately get dropped. The second reason is that he just held onto the ball far too long sometimes, attempting to hunt for big plays. He'll turn down easy throws early in the play to wait for a long concept to develop, leading to a sack or a long play where he tries to outrun the defense if the concept never develops. Another area that I feel needs to improve is his processing of advanced concepts. Generally, he's pretty quick to find who he needs to go to on the shorter, quicker concepts underneath, but I felt that he was slow to process more advanced concepts, leading to him constantly being late on throws. It's not uncommon for prospects to not have high-level processing right off the bat, but a prospect can usually mitigate that deficiency with high-level arm strength that allows them to zip the ball into tightly closing windows. It works in the opposite direction for prospects with poor arm strength. They can generally raise their ceiling and mitigate poor arm strength with high-level processing that allows them to deliver the ball in a spot before a DB is prepared to defend it. As I said before, I don't think Shedeur shows the level of arm strength on tape to make up for his lateness, but I also don't think he shows the level of processing to mitigate the arm strength issue, leading to a catch-22 and a lot of negative results. When I say negative results in the context of being late on throws, I mean 3 things: sacks, incompletions, and missed opportunities. On the point about sacks, Shedeur's tendency to want to see a wide receiver open before throwing leads to him holding onto the ball longer than needed, which results in more sacks. In the same vein, being slower to process means that he'll be late on reads, which means he'll have to turn it down and move to another, thus taking longer to read out the play as a whole and again, leading to more sacks. On the point about incompletions, being late inherently creates incompletions. The advantage of knowing the play on offense is that you and the wide receiver both know the route, where it's going, and when it's going to break. This means you can anticipate when a wide receiver will get open, and you could throw the ball before they actually break their route. But he doesn't really do that often, preferring to see wide receivers open before doing so. The problem with this is that the DB also sees the wide receiver open too, and by virtue of being late on the throw, he's giving DBs more time to see the route develop and to cover it or to get into the catch point to break up the pass. For example, on this play, the Colorado wide receivers are running a switch release here with the inside man running a wheel route and the outside man running a skinny post type thing. After the first few seconds, you can see that Kansas is running an inverted cover 2, but it isn't even really necessary for you to know that if you just read the leverage of the defenders. You have this guy facing the opposite direction, these 2 guys running up the field with the wheel route, and your wide receiver on the skinny post has the angle for you to rip this ball in for a touchdown. You can throw it right now. Shedeur sees the play developing, but just takes a little bit longer than you want to see because he wants to confirm that the wide receiver is actually going to get open. And that split second becomes the difference here, because he releases the ball and the defender gets right into the play to break it up. You can see that the wide receiver has to sit in the end zone and wait for the ball. It just needs to be seen and thrown much quicker than it actually was here. And that play is not the only play, but you do see a lot of these late throws go unpunished in a lot of these games. On this next play, UCF is running cover 2, which has 2 relevant weaknesses: the deep middle in between the 2 safeties, and what is called the honey hole, which is the area between the sideline in front of the safety and behind the linebacker. Shedeur gets to this read quickly, and as we can see from the end zone view, he sees it coming open. This ball can be thrown right now from a clean pocket with anticipation, but instead he takes multiple extra ticks to actually get this ball out. But like I said, it went unpunished. There wasn't any DB in the area, so he had that time, But in the NFL, not against UCF, that needs to be thrown much earlier. Here, you can see that he's looking right at the wide receiver, he has a clean pocket, and his feet are ready to throw. He can release this ball right now, but instead, he waits an extra couple ticks, allowing the defender to see the play and close in on the receiver, and also making the receiver wait for the ball to arrive. But as our third consequence of being late on throws and being slow to process, we also have to turn to missed opportunities. Both missed opportunities to throw down the field and throw with anticipation into tight windows. There were lots of these on his tape, as he'd often miss wide receivers streaking open due to being late to get to their read, or he'd be too late to throw the ball into a tight window, causing him to have to hit a check down instead for less yards. Here, he's looking at the receiver streaking up the seam, the DB's leverage is completely away from him, and all he has to do is fire this ball inside before the linebacker drops back into this area. But he waits too long and is put under pressure, resulting in a run to the line of scrimmage. On this play, if we look at the end zone view first, you can see the moment when Shedeur moves off his first read to his second read, because he'll move his feet to be square with the wide receiver. Moving back to the sideline view now, knowing when he moves to his second read, we can see how late he is to move off his first read. It doesn't look like he moves off that first read until right now, which at that point is far too late in the down to throw to the second read. The DB knows what's there. The play's dead, but he throws it anyway, leading to an interception. On this play, I have no clue why he doesn't throw to this guy streaking up the seam. It looks like he's looking directly at him, and there's no other receivers in this area of the field that he could be looking at, but for some reason he looks it off. Here, I understand he has pressure, but we see high-level quarterbacks hit the top of their drop and rip this throw in between defenders. I have about 250 more plays of Shedeur saved on my hard drive here, and I've probably got about another 25 or so examples of these types of plays, but we'll stick with those. The point here is that he doesn't show the elite processing quickness of someone who consistently wins with their ability to read the defense. So let's wrap up his weaknesses section with this. For a player who probably plays best in a game manager or pocket passer type role, he holds the ball too long, misses too many open reads, is late on too many throws, and takes too many sacks. But for a top 5 quarterback prospect, he doesn't have the physical tools, he generally doesn't have the ability to make his coaches' lives easier by opening up the playbook, he generally doesn't have the ability to elevate his teammates by throwing perfect passes, he generally doesn't have the ability to make up for his mistakes in processing with athletic tools or lasering throws into tight windows, and he generally doesn't have the ability to evade sacks and torch defenses down the field on the run, or to punish defenses when the structure of the play breaks down. I say generally because there are certainly plays that you can point to prove me wrong, and that's all well and fine, but I'll point you to the saying, you are what you repeatedly do. He can evade defenders. He can make impressive throws on the run. He can have a perfect deep ball, but he doesn't do it consistently. And the lack of tools make it such that there's not a lot of confidence that he will be able to do it consistently, especially when the competition is harder. Because he doesn't have a reliably higher ceiling, and he hurts his own floor with his playing style, this puts him in a scenario where he needs to be in a more narrowly tailored offense, which is not really ideal for a top 5 draft pick. It's happened before, and it's happened with success, so that doesn't mean it won't work out. What I'm saying is that your return on investment is much lower, and you might wind up boxing your team into being a very good team, but not a great team. Even assuming he hits the high range of his outcomes by becoming like a Jimmy G or a Tua or a Brock Purdy instead of Mac Jones. There is a world in which this weaknesses section ages poorly if he's put in a situation that fits his skill sets with great coaches and weapons around him, and honestly, I'd be happy to see it. I don't root for any players to fail, and I'd personally rather be wrong than have someone's career fail and me be right. But based on his collective strengths and weaknesses, my personal conclusion after watching the tape is that I just don't see the upside to be a top 10 NFL quarterback unless he plays a more mature and cerebral game, picking apart defenses all day with timing and accuracy. That will, of course, depend on his level of study and dedication to the game, which is something that I cannot offer an opinion on because I have no idea. So all in all, after times in this video where you might have thought that I loved him, and times where you might have thought that I hated him, I have him graded as a mid-second round to early third round draft pick. Would I personally take him top 5? No. But I'm also not always right, and there are many factors that go into the NFL draft, including a lot of things that I cannot know, such as personality and work ethic. I'm just a person watching the film and giving you my opinion. Speaking of, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around. Let me know what you think below. Think I'm right? Think I'm wrong? Feel free to point out anything you disagree with, and we'll discuss. What is your opinion on Shedeur Sanders? Lastly, what players do you guys want to see me talk about next? I'm looking forward to talking with you guys below, and if you're not subscribed, make sure to do so now, and like the video as it really helps grow the community. Otherwise, that's it. Later.
There'll be a day when AI takes over and it'll make us their pets. The day AI takes over, they're going to pass judgment.